Welcome back, guys, to Fear Begins, a step towards the horror. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true and disturbing stories about people who got lost in Appalachia. These stories show how quickly the woods can shift from peaceful to nightmarish. But before we begin, please consider subscribing and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. The trip had been my idea. We've been talking about it for months, me, Jared, and Mikey, just circling the same Sunday plan like everyone does. We'd meet for drinks, get nostalgic, talk about how we all needed a break, how we missed the old days of walking into the woods, and worrying about nothing but bugs and blisters. Then the conversation would fizzle out, and nobody would do anything. One evening, after a long week and too many drinks, I finally said, "Let's pick a weekend and go." Jared looked at his calendar. Mikey muttered something about needing to clear it with his girlfriend, and I said, "No more excuses. We're doing it." Appalachian backcountry, 3 nights, minimal gear, 0 signal, and somehow that stuck. We weren't planning some grand survival trek. None of us wanted to be Bear Grylls. We just wanted to unplug, real silence, no phones, no calendars, just trees, fire, and the sound of our boots on the trail. We picked a stretch of the Appalachians in northern Georgia, not too remote to be dangerous, but far enough off the popular paths to breathe. Jared handled the route planning. He's the spreadsheet type. Mikey stocked up on snacks like we were prepping for the apocalypse. I packed light. I always do. The first day went smooth. The weather held. We made good time. The rhythm between us came back instantly. We talked about old classmates, made up stories about people we passed on the trail, complained about our jobs, then circled back to being completely quiet for an hour without it ever feeling awkward. By late afternoon, we found a little clearing by a stream. It wasn't on the map, but it looked perfect. Flat ground, tree cover, and water nearby. The place felt right, like it had been waiting for us while the others unpacked and gathered firewood. I headed down to the water. My shirt was soaked, clinging to me like a second skin. I just needed to cool off. I dropped my pack, peeled off the shirt, set my watch and jacket on a nearby rock, and crouched by the stream. The watch wasn't fancy, old and beat up. A gift from my dad. Cheap but reliable. I remember holding it for a second before rinsing my shirt, thinking I'd slid it into my pocket. I was sure I had. I splashed my face, wiped my arms with the wet shirt, wringing it out before heading back up. By the time I reached the fire pit, the sun was dipping low. Mikey was setting kindling, Jared debating whether to hang the bear bag now or later. Then I checked my pockets. No watch. At first, I thought I dropped it near the stream, so I went back, didn't say anything, just retraced my steps with my eyes on the ground. Checked the rock, patted the dirt, got down on one knee. Scanning inch by inch, still nothing. Frustration set in quick. The quiet kind, when your heart races but you don't want to show it. I waded into the stream, running my hands over every stone I could reach. It felt ridiculous, pointless, still nothing. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't even about the watch itself. It was the not knowing I'd held it. I told myself, put it in your pocket. And now it was just gone. Eventually, I gave up. Told myself it slipped into the current or fell without me noticing. Who knows? That night was peaceful. We cooked, joked, shared a bottle of whiskey Mikey had smuggled in. I didn't mention the watch. Didn't want to kill the mood. I figured I'd let it go, and I slept better than expected. The kind of deep sleep where you wake up sore but rested like your brain finally shut off. The next morning, we packed up early. The plan was to loop back toward the trailhead, then hit a diner we'd seen on the drive-in. We moved slower, legs stiff from the day before, but the walk was easy, familiar, uneventful until it wasn't. We were maybe 100 yards from the parking lot when Jared froze. "Hold up," he said, "Mikey." And I looked up. He pointed toward a tree just off the trail. At first, I didn't see it. Then I did. Something was hanging from a branch, swinging gently. My watch, unmistakable, same band, same scratches on the face. Same tiny crack in the corner. I jogged forward and jumped, grabbing it clean. The second I touched it, I knew something was wrong. It was wet, not rain wet, not dew wet. It was slick with something cold and thick. Slippery, but sticky, not syrup. More like raw egg whites mixed with Vaseline. I dropped it instantly, recoiling. But the slime clung to my fingers. I wiped my hand on my pants. Nothing. Scrub it harder. Still nothing. I poured half my water bottle over it, rubbing until most of it came off. Then the smell hit me. Not overpowering, but sharp, sour chemical, not man-made. Like old meat mixed with moss or mold and something that should never rot. It twisted my stomach. Mikey made a joke, something dumb about tree jizz. Jared forced a laugh, thin and uneasy. Neither of them stepped closer, neither offered to touch. I left the watch on the ground, didn't even nudge it with my boot. We walked the last stretch in silence, boots crunching gravel. Back home, I tried to forget. Told myself it was sap or a weird fungus. Maybe some kid had found it and hung it up as a prank. I wanted to believe that, but I kept thinking about where I'd lost it. How far away it was, how unmarked it had been. No one had followed us, no one even knew we were there. And the slime, it wasn't sap. I've touched sap. I've touched fish guts. This wasn't that. For days, I searched online. Tree fungus, bacterial ooze, insect secretions, pictures of slime molds. Nothing matched. It stuck with me, not just the texture or the smell, but the way it was placed, that branch, that exact height, that perfect position over the trail. It didn't feel random. It felt like something wanted me to find it, like it had been waiting. The memory started bleeding into everything. Every black watch I saw made my stomach flip. Every hiking story made me drift, unfocused. Sometimes I'd be mid-task at work before realizing I'd been thinking about that branch, that slime, that smell. Weeks passed, then months. I tried to let it fade, but it never did. I still hike, but not the same way. I plan carefully. I stick to familiar trails. I notice things I used to ignore. Odd footprints, shifted rocks, anything out of place. The mountains aren't just landscape anymore. They're not just trees or silence. There's something bigger. I'd booked this little off-grid cabin way out in the Appalachian backcountry. I mean, completely out. No cell service, no internet, no other houses for what felt like miles. Just trees, hills, and silence. The listing had 5 grainy photos. A log structure with a sagging tin roof, a hammock tied between 2 crooked trees, a fire pit built from old stones, and not much else. The place looked like it could fall over in a strong wind. The price was way lower than I expected. That probably should have been a red flag. But at the time it just felt like a deal. I booked it without thinking twice. The drive there was a solid 3 hours. The last stretch was a gravel road that looked more like someone had dumped rock into a dry creek and decided that counted as a road. I didn't see another car once I turned off the highway. Not a house, not a barn, not even a mailbox. Just dense woods on either side and a sky that kept getting dimmer even though it wasn't anywhere near sunset. When I finally reached the cabin, it looked exactly like the pictures, weirdly comforting. Sometimes those off-grid listings lie with wide angles and clever lighting. But this one was honest. It was small, just one room, no frills, with a wood pile stacked against a leaning shed out back. Inside was a basic setup. A bed with a faded quilt, a tiny kitchen counter, a propane stove, and a radio that didn't pick up anything but static. No reception, no distractions. Perfect, honestly. The first few days were great. I hiked the trails around the cabin, though trails might be generous. They were more like old hunting paths marked with faded orange ribbons or scratched tree bark. The ribbons looked like they'd been there forever. I didn't see another soul, just the occasional deer bounding off into the brush, a few turkeys, and once a bunch of bones half buried in the dirt, ribs, a spine, probably a deer. That's what I told myself. I didn't examine them too closely. By day 4, I was feeling a little more confident. I decided to go deeper. I packed a flask of water, a bag of trail mix, and followed one of the less touched paths that veered off behind a cluster of rocks I hadn't noticed before. This one dipped sharply down into a hollow that hadn't been visible from the higher trails. The path was barely there, overgrown, covered in vines and roots, but still walkable. At first, everything was fine. The air felt cooler down in the hollow and the trees grew denser. But after about an hour, I realized I hadn't heard a single bird since I started descending. No squirrels, no wind, just a crunch of my boots and the faint sound of my breathing. Then came that weird feeling like I was walking in circles. I kept thinking I'd seen that same patch of moss, that same fallen log. I even passed what looked like an old shoe half buried in dirt. I tried turning around, but I must have taken a wrong turn. No matter which way I walked, nothing looked familiar anymore. That was when I realized I was lost. The light was starting to dim, and I wasn't about to stumble around in the dark. I found a flat spot under some hemlocks, made a small fire, and tried to calm down. I kept telling myself I'd find my way back in the morning. I'd follow the sun, find the creek. There had to be a way. That night, I couldn't sleep, not just because I was uncomfortable, but because of the voices I was half dosing, staring into the fire when I heard it, soft, low, right at the edge of the trees. My name just once, like someone was trying not to wake a baby. I sat straight up, every muscle locked. Then maybe 30 seconds later, another voice, same tone, different direction, like two people casually calling a dog, except it was my name. I hadn't told anyone I was going out here. No one had the address. My phone hadn't had a signal since I passed the gas station, 2 hours outside of town. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there gripping a stick so tightly it left splinters in my palm. By sunrise, I was already moving. I found a creek and followed it downstream. Water meant people, right? Eventually, it would cross a road. That was my logic. After a while, maybe 2-3 miles, I came across the remains of an old campsite, a rusted fire ring, the shredded remnants of a tent, the fabric swallowed by vines. It looked like it had been there for years, maybe decades. But nailed to one of the trees nearby was a wooden sign, not handwritten, rooted letters carefully carved. "No roads after here." I stood there staring at it. It looked relatively new, not weathered, but there was nothing around. No trail, no road, no path, nothing. That night was worse. No voices this time, just footsteps, slow, steady, circling me. Non-animal footsteps, human. You can tell the difference. Once they stopped right behind me, close enough that I swear I could hear someone breathing. And then they laughed, just one short breath, like someone was standing above me, finding the whole thing funny. I didn't move. I didn't blink. I waited for dawn like it was a lifeline. The next day, around midday, I tripped on something buried under the leaves, wood, old, cracked. I brushed away the dirt and realized I was standing on the roof of what used to be a shack. I followed the slope around back and found a half-collapsed doorway. Inside, the place was rotting, damp, a cot covered in moldy blankets, and on the walls, carvings, circles rough, scratched in, hundreds of them, some with nails pounded through, others etched over and over, the same shape. On top of a wooden crate, I found a pile of maps, hand-drawn, dozens of them, all of the same forest. But none of them matched. In one, the trails twisted clockwise. In another, they split and reconnected in impossible ways. One showed a cave marked with an X, but in the corner of every map in careful block letters was the same word. Still, I took the map that looked the most complete and tried to use it to get out. I followed the creek again, climbed a ridge that looked like it might lead somewhere. And that's when I found the stairs. They were just there, hidden behind a wall of vines. A clean square cut into the earth with stone steps going down into black, not carved, built like part of a cellar or a tunnel. I stood there for a long time, listening, waiting for any sound, any clue, but there was nothing. I stepped down once, then again. Behind me, I heard the faintest crunch, like someone shifting their weight. I spun around, The woods were empty. When I looked back, there were no stairs, just solid ground, roots, leaves, as if the whole thing had never existed. I ran, I don't know how long or how far. At one point, I collapsed on my knees, chest heaving, palms in the dirt. When I looked up, there it was again, another tree, another carving. Still, this one was fresh, the bark still weeping sap around the letters that night. I didn't even try to make a fire. I curled up under a brush pile, wrapped myself in my jacket, and tried to disappear. When I opened my eyes, the light was different, warmer, real, and then I smelled it, wood smoke. I followed it uphill slowly, aching all over, and then I saw it. The cabin exactly the way I'd left it. Same hammock, same fire pit, same truck parked out front. I didn't go inside. I just sat on the steps for a long time. My phone was completely dead. My bag was gone, so was the map. I got in my truck and left. A week later, I came back with a friend who knows this area like the back of his hand. We spent the whole day searching. According to him, there's no hollow past the ridge, no creek, no shack, no stairs, he said. Maybe I got turned around. Dehydrated. Maybe I just had some weird backwoods nightmare. My cousin Mason asked if I could help him check out a stretch of woods near his hunting lease in the Appalachian. He was on this kick about clearing new trails, said he wanted to mark a path up the ridge, maybe set a few blinds for deer season. He'd been talking about it for weeks, showing me maps he'd sketched on napkins and gas receipts, excited in that quiet way he always got when something stuck in his head. Mason had hunted that land since we were kids. He was a few years older, always the more outdoorsy one. Growing up, I was the guy who stayed behind at the campsite, while he ran off into the woods with a rifle and way too much confidence. But he made it sound like a simple walk, and honestly, I didn't have anything better to do that weekend. The weather was decent. I hadn't been hiking in a while, and part of me figured I could use the fresh air. We left early and drove his old beat-up pickup along a winding road that barely counted as paved. Around 10 o'clock, we pulled off at a gravel turnout. The road wasn't marked, no signs, just trees pressing in from both sides like the forest was trying to reclaim it. Mason killed the engine, grabbed his gear, and handed me a bottle of water. "You good?" he asked, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. I nodded. "Lead the way, Daniel Boone." He laughed short and dry, then stepped into the trees like he'd done it 100 times before. We didn't take much with us. 2 bottles of water, a couple sandwiches wrapped in foil, and a compass clipped to Mason's belt. No map, no GPS, nothing fancy. The plan was to be back before lunch. We weren't camping. We weren't even planning on staying long. Just a quick look at the land, maybe an hour or 2 of walking, then back to the truck. The first 30 minutes were uneventful. The path wasn't really a trail, more like a narrow break in the underbrush, winding between oaks and saplings. The forest floor was soft and damp, covered in wet leaves and moss. I could feel it soaking into my boots. Mason moved ahead with the ease of someone who belonged out there. I followed behind, not paying much attention, just enjoying the quiet. It was a kind of silence that felt earned, peaceful. Even with mud squishing underfoot and the occasional snap of twigs, it felt calm, familiar. Then Mason stopped and started patting his pockets. "Ah, crap," he muttered. "What?" I asked. "My license. I left it in the truck." I stared at him. "Seriously?" He shrugged like it was nothing. "You keep going straight." "Yeah. The ridge runs parallel to the path. Just follow that line. I'll catch up in 10. I opened my mouth to argue, but he was already turning around. "Just don't veer off," he added, over his shoulder. "It's a straight shot. I'll be right behind you." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to wait, but the way he said it made me feel like I'd be slowing him down. So I kept walking. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I slowed down, glancing back more and more often. The woods were still quiet. Still that same soft hush of wind through leaves and my boots pressing into damp ground. By the time I hit a small clearing, I was annoyed. I sat on a mossy log and waited. Staring at the trail behind me like I could will him into view, I called his name a few times. No response. Just my voice bouncing off the trees and fading into silence. I figured maybe he'd taken a different route, maybe circled around ahead somehow, so I kept walking. The trail got thinner. Patches of dirt disappeared, and eventually, there wasn't really a trail at all anymore. Just forest, trees everywhere, no clear direction. I turned back, planning to follow my footprints, or at least the way I remembered coming. Only problem was everything looked the same. The clearing I just walked through gone, no log, no break. In the trees, just more woods. That flutter started in my chest. My phone had no bars, not even a flicker of signal. I pulled out the compass. The needle moved, but not steady. It tilted one way, then drifted the other, like it couldn't make up its mind. I told myself to stay calm. I wasn't lost, not really. I could still see the ridgeline through gaps in the trees. If I kept that to my right and kept moving downhill, eventually I'd hit a road or a creek or something. That was the plan, just keep walking. But every time I thought I was making progress, the woods stretched out in front of me like they were rearranging themselves while I blinked. I started looking for landmarks, broken branches, odd-shaped stumps. Anything, nothing helped. Then I saw it. A plastic water bottle sitting near the base of a tree. Same brand I had. Same kind. I stepped closer and picked it up. My initials were scratched faintly into the side. I'd done that the week before, carving it with a key. It was mine. I dropped it earlier that morning when my bag slipped off my shoulder. Now here it was again. Somehow I'd walked in a loop without noticing, but I hadn't turned. I was sure of it. My heart started to hammer. I wiped my palms on my jeans and stared up at the ridge, trying to steady my breathing. I pulled out my knife and started carving slashes into the trees as I walked. Quick marks on each trunk, angled downward so I'd recognize them if I came back. About an hour later, I saw one of the marks again, same cut. Only this time something had been added beneath it. Another slash, rough, crooked, dragging deep into the bark. It looked fresh. I stared at it, then turned slowly to scan the trees around me. Nothing, no movement, no sound. Then I heard a soft crack behind me, just one, like a stick snapping under a boot. I froze, called Mason's name again, louder this time, still nothing. I didn't wait. I picked up my pace, knife in one hand, eyes forward. Every couple minutes I heard something, faint, subtle, like someone walking just out of sync with me. A footstep, a rustle, then silence again. I didn't run. Not yet. I told myself if I kept going downhill, I'd be fine, but the woods didn't change. If anything, they got thicker, darker. Then I found it, a fire pit, small stones stacked in a circle, blackened with old ash. Beside it, a sandwich, still wrapped in foil, half open, like someone had started to eat it and stopped. Ham and cheese, Mason's sandwich. I stared at it. He packed two. That morning, one for me, one for him. This was his. But the bread was stiff, the cheese dried and cracked. It looked like it had been there for days. That's when I lost it. I bolted, tore down through brush and undergrowth, ignoring branches slapping my face, knife tight in my grip, legs burning. Beneath me, I heard it again, movement fast, heavy, matching my steps without running. I didn't look back. I knew if I did, I'd freeze. The slope steepened. Suddenly, I was falling, tumbling, rolling until gravel tore into my palms and knees. When I stopped, I was lying on pavement, a narrow two-lane road cutting through the trees like a scar. I scrambled to my feet and started walking. Didn't look at the forest, didn't check behind me. The sounds had stopped, but that cold feeling of being watched clung to me like sweat. After a few minutes, a rust-colored pickup came around the bend. The driver looked like he'd been on that road his whole life. He slowed down, leaned out, and asked if I was okay. I climbed in without hesitating. Didn't care who he was or where he was going. I just needed to be out, back in town, I told them what I could. I didn't lie, but I didn't tell them everything either. Just said we got separated, that I lost track of the path and couldn't find Mason again. Search teams went out the next morning. Dogs, volunteers, even drones. They combed the whole area, but didn't find anything. I was 19 when I lost the trail in the Appalachian. It still lives in my head like a splinter I can't dig out. I've tried not to think about it. Tried to let it fade into the background like other weird things that happen in life. But this one doesn't leave. It just sits there, quiet, heavy. It was supposed to be a simple solo hike, nothing epic, nothing risky. Just a 2-hour loop along part of the East Ridge, somewhere west of a little town called Merrow's Gap. A friend from college had mentioned it weeks earlier. He said it was peaceful, barely trafficked with a decent view halfway through. I thought, yeah, that sounds perfect. I'd been feeling burned out, and I wanted something that didn't involve staring at my phone or pretending I was fine around people. So I packed light, water, snacks, a compass, a knife, and my phone for music or emergency GPS. The day was clear. I parked at the lot, signed the logbook at the trailhead, and headed in around late morning. I didn't even tell anyone exactly where I was going. Just sent a text saying I was going hiking and would be back that evening. The first half hour was smooth. The trail was wide enough to walk comfortably with gradual inclines, and a few wooden markers nailed to the trees every so often. No big climbs, no tricky turns. It was almost too easy. That was probably part of the problem. After the ridge, maybe. Halfway through, I spotted a narrow gap between the trees to my right. The slope looked gentler and the ground seemed packed down like it might be another trail, or maybe a deer path. It wasn't Mark, but it didn't look wild either. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe I thought it would shave some time off. Maybe I just wanted to see something off the main track. I stepped off the trail. I figured I'd walk along it for a few minutes and rejoin the main loop on the other side of the hill. It didn't feel like a big decision at the time. I didn't feel lost, not yet. But within 5, maybe 10 minutes, the trail behind me was gone. I stopped and turned around, expecting to see the same little break in the trees. But there was nothing. Just brush and woods like the trees had closed ranks behind me. I frowned, walked back the way I thought I'd come, and realized fast that it wasn't the way at all. The slope wasn't the same. The trees weren't the same. And the path I'd followed was gone. At first, I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt ridiculous. How do you lose a trail you were just on? I told myself not to panic. I remembered that if you get turned around, you're supposed to go downhill. Water collects downhill. Water leads to people. So I did that. I chose a direction and stuck with it. That's when the loop started. I saw a grove of thin birches ahead. White trunks with bark peeling like old paper. The kind of thing you notice without trying. I passed through it, kept walking, and 20 minutes later, I saw it again. Same trees, same spacing, same little knot in one of the trunks, shaped like a spiral. Then there was a crooked stump split down the center with 2 roots poking out of the dirt, like it had been pried up and jammed back in the wrong way. I saw that 3 times, each time on a different slope. By then, my throat was dry in that specific tight way that has nothing to do with thirst. I stopped and pulled out my knife. I chose a sturdy tree and carved a long horizontal line into the bark. Sap bled out immediately, sticky and white. I made sure to remember everything. How high the cut was, how the bark curled, the lichen at the base. Then I walked straight. I didn't veer. I didn't explore. I didn't stop to rest. I walked straight for at least half an hour, and when I looked up, the marked tree was in front of me. I didn't move for a long time. I just stared. The exact same cut, still fresh, same lichen. Same spider web glinting near the roots. It was like the forest had folded back in on itself, or like I'd been walking in a circle I couldn't feel. The air felt different then, not colder, just heavier, like pressure inside your head when you're about to cry or about to pass out. My ears popped. Everything went quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. No bugs, no birds, just trees, silence, and that one impossible tree. I turned on my phone, no service, just the battery icon lower than I remembered. I shut it off again. I needed to conserve it in case I needed light. I tried tracking the sun, thinking at least that could give me some orientation. But even that went strange. The shadows didn't line up right. Sometimes they stretched sideways. Even though the sun was overhead, sometimes they shifted too fast, like watching time-lapse in real life. The forest felt like it was moving. Not in a dramatic way, not trees sliding around. More like something subtle had shifted when I wasn't looking. By the time the light dimmed, I was trembling. Then I heard it. Not leaves rustling, not branches cracking. This was slower, heavier, measured steps, not rushing. Just matching me. Whenever I stopped, it stopped. When I walked, I could hear it. Moving again. Far enough back that I couldn't see it, but close enough that I knew it was real. I turned fast more than once, trying to catch it, but there was nothing. No movement, no figure ducking behind trees, just the sound, always one. Step behind, I yelled, a single sharp, "Hey!" Hoping another hiker had veered off like I had, but the woods swallowed the sound. After another stretch of aimless walking, I found something. An old hunting blind half collapsed, tilted sideways, but with a ladder that still held weight. It looked like no one had touched it in years. The wood was dry and splintered, but not rotten. I climbed up. I needed to be off the ground. I figured I'd wait for morning and try again. Maybe daylight would shake whatever this was loose. At some point, I must have fallen asleep. I don't remember when I woke up. It was like someone had pressed pause on reality and rearranged everything. The trees were wrong, closer, leaning in like they'd grown toward the blind overnight. My marked tree was gone, no sign of it anywhere. The underbrush looked disturbed, trampled in a circle around the base. But the footprints weren't mine. They were bigger, longer strides, pressed deep into the soil like whatever made them had weight. And they didn't lead away. They just circled over and over, around and around. I didn't think. I didn't wait. I climbed down and started running. Branches snapped at my arms and face. Thorns ripped through my sleeves. My legs burned and my chest felt like it was collapsing in on itself. But I didn't stop. Then suddenly the woods broke open, a clearing, and cutting across it like a scratch. Across film was a dirt road wide enough for a truck. Too perfect, too straight. It looked like someone had drawn it there just for me. I didn't care how or why. I got on it and walked. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. After what felt like hours, a shape appeared through the trees. A cabin slouched with age, but still standing. Smoke curling weakly from the chimney like it was as tired as I was. I barely made it to the door before knocking. An old man opened it, thin frame, face-like. Old leather, eyes that didn't blink much. He didn't look surprised, didn't look curious. He just opened the door and said, "You're lost." I nodded. That was all I could do. He stepped aside, handed me a tin cup of water without asking anything, and let me sit at the little table near the window. He didn't ask where I was from, didn't want to know what happened. After a while, he said he'd drive me into town. I didn't argue. We drove for maybe 40 minutes. I didn't see any turns or intersections. Just the same road winding through the woods like it had always been there. And then just once, I looked back. The cabin was gone. Not distant. Gone, just. Thick trees pressing close to the road. No breaks in sight. I never went back to that area. I never even found the spot again on a map. My cousin Mason asked if I could help him check out a stretch of woods near his hunting lease in the Appalachian. He was on this kick about clearing new trails, said he wanted to mark a path up the ridge, maybe set a few blinds for deer season. He'd been talking about it for weeks, showing me maps he'd sketched on napkins and gas receipts, excited in that quiet way he always got when something stuck in his head. Mason had hunted that land since we were kids. He was a few years older, always the more outdoorsy one, growing up. I was the guy who stayed behind at the campsite, while he ran off into the woods with a rifle and way too much confidence. But he made it sound like a simple lock, and honestly, I didn't have anything better to do that weekend. The weather was decent. I hadn't been hiking in a while, and part of me figured I could use the fresh air. We left early and drove his old beat-up pickup along a winding road that barely counted as paved. Around 10 o'clock, we pulled off at a gravel turnout. The road wasn't marked, no signs, just trees pressing in from both sides like the forest was trying to reclaim it. Mason killed the engine, grabbed his gear, and handed me a bottle of water. "You good?" he asked, slinging his backpack over one shoulder. I nodded. "Lead the way, Daniel Boone." He laughed short and dry, then stepped into the trees like he'd done it 100 times before. We didn't take much with us. 2 bottles of water, a couple sandwiches wrapped in foil, and a compass clipped to Mason's belt. No map, no GPS, nothing fancy. The plan was to be back before lunch. We weren't camping. We weren't even planning on staying long. Just a quick look at the land, maybe an hour or 2 of walking, then back to the truck. The first 30 minutes were uneventful. The path wasn't really a trail, more like a narrow break in the underbrush. Winding between oaks and saplings, the forest floor was soft and damp, covered in wet leaves and moss. I could feel it soaking into my boots. Mason moved ahead with the ease of someone who belonged out there. I followed behind, not paying much attention, just enjoying the quiet. It was a kind of silence that felt earned, peaceful. Even with mud squishing underfoot and the occasional snap of twigs, it felt calm, familiar. Then Mason stopped and started patting his pockets. "Ah, crap," he muttered. "What?" I asked. "My license. I left it in the truck." I stared at him. "Seriously?" He shrugged like it was nothing. "You keep going straight." "Yeah, the ridge runs parallel to the path. Just follow that line. I'll catch up in 10. I opened my mouth to argue, but he was already turning around. "Just don't veer off," he added. Over his shoulder. "It's a straight shot. I'll be right behind you." I hesitated. Part of me wanted to wait, but the way he said it made me feel like I'd be slowing him down. So I kept walking. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I slowed down, glancing back more and more often. The woods were still quiet. Still that same soft hush of wind through leaves, and my boots pressing into damp ground. By the time I hit a small clearing, I was annoyed. I sat on a mossy log and waited, staring at the trail behind me like I could will him into view. I called his name a few times. No response. Just my voice bouncing off the trees and fading into silence. I figured maybe he'd taken a different route, maybe circled around ahead somehow, so I kept walking. The trail got thinner. Patches of dirt disappeared. And eventually, there wasn't really a trail at all anymore. Just forest. Trees everywhere. No clear direction. I turned back, planning to follow my footprints, or at least the way I remembered coming. Only problem was everything looked the same. The clearing I just walked through gone. No log, no break. In the trees, just more woods. That flutter started in my chest. My phone had no bars, not even a flicker of signal. I pulled out the compass. The needle moved, but not steady. It tilted one way, then drifted the other, like it couldn't make up its mind. I told myself to stay calm. I wasn't lost, not really. I could still see the ridgeline through gaps in the trees. If I kept that to my right and kept moving downhill, eventually I'd hit a road or a creek or something. That was the plan, just keep walking. But every time I thought I was making progress, the woods stretched out in front of me like they were rearranging themselves while I blinked. I started looking for landmarks, broken branches, odd-shaped stumps. Anything, nothing helped. Then I saw it, a plastic water bottle sitting near the base of a tree. Same brand I had, same kind. I stepped closer and picked it up. My initials were scratched faintly into the side. I'd done that the week before, carving it with a key. It was mine. I dropped it earlier that morning when my bag slipped off my shoulder. Now here it was again. Somehow I'd walked in a loop without noticing. But I hadn't turned. I was sure of it. My heart started to hammer. I wiped my palms on my jeans and stared up at the ridge, trying to steady my breathing. I pulled out my knife and started carving slashes into the trees as I walked. Quick marks on each trunk angled downward so I'd recognize them if I came back. About an hour later, I saw one of the marks again, same cut. Only this time something had been added beneath it, another slash, rough, crooked. Dragging deep into the bark, it looked fresh. I stared at it, then turned slowly to scan the trees around me. Nothing, no movement, no sound. Then I heard a soft crack behind me, just one, like a stick snapping under a boot. I froze, called Mason's name again, louder this time, still nothing. I didn't wait. I picked up my pace, knife in one hand, eyes forward. Every couple minutes I heard something, faint, subtle, like someone walking just out of sync with me. A footstep, a rustle, then silence again. I didn't run. Not yet. I told myself if I kept going downhill, I'd be fine. But the woods didn't change. If anything, they got thicker, darker. Then I found a fire pit, small stones stacked in a circle, blackened with old ash. Beside it, a sandwich, still wrapped in foil, half open, like someone had started to eat it and stopped. Ham and cheese, Mason's sandwich. I stared at it. He packed two. That morning, one for me, one for him. This was his. But the bread was stiff, the cheese dried and cracked. It looked like it had been there for days. That's when I lost it. I bolted, tore down through brush and undergrowth, ignoring branches slapping my face, knife tight in my grip, legs burning. Beneath me, I heard it again, movement fast, heavy, matching my steps without running. I didn't look back. I knew if I did, I'd freeze. The slope steepened. Suddenly, I was falling, tumbling, rolling until gravel tore into my palms and knees. When I stopped, I was lying on pavement, a narrow two-lane road cutting through the trees like a scar. I scrambled to my feet and started walking. Didn't look at the forest, didn't check behind me. The sounds had stopped, but that cold feeling of being watched clung to me like sweat. After a few minutes, a rust-colored pickup came around the bend. The driver looked like he'd been on that road his whole life. He slowed down, leaned out, and asked if I was okay. I climbed in without hesitating. Didn't care who he was or where he was going. I just needed to be out, back in town. I told them what I could. I didn't lie, but I didn't tell them everything either. Just said we got separated, that I lost track of the path and couldn't find Mason again. Search teams went out the next morning. Dogs, volunteers, even drones. They combed the whole area, but didn't find anything. At that point, I'd been living in Marlow for almost a year. It's one of those towns people don't really talk about, unless they're from there or trying to leave it. The kind of place where trains still run through but never stop. The only 24-hour anything is a vending machine outside the laundromat. I had moved there for a job. Contract surveying, mostly zoning reports and terrain analysis. The work paid fine. But the days all started bleeding together. Monday might as well have been Thursday. By Friday I would start getting twitchy. That week had been worse than usual. I had spent 3 straight days squinting at blueprints and satellite maps. My head felt like it was full of sand, so that Friday night, after heaving up a microwave burrito and staring blankly at the wall for 20 minutes, I made a decision. I needed out, real out, not just walking down to the gas station or sitting behind the wheel in a parking lot with a podcast on. I wanted open air, no cell towers, no man-made sounds, just trees, sky, and whatever else existed beyond the map. I packed fast. Just a tarp, a couple bottles of water, granola, a flashlight, a lighter, that old revolver my grandfather left me. More for peace of mind than anything, and a pocket knife. I threw it all in a pack and left before I could talk myself out of it. I drove west toward the Blue Knives, a stretch of mountains that wasn't exactly tourist-friendly, not dangerous, just forgotten. No real trailheads, no visitor centers, just road, trees, and if you knew where to pull off, a dozen unmarked paths that went who knows where. That was what I wanted, somewhere quiet, off the radar. I found one around dusk, off an old service road with a faded metal sign rusted beyond recognition. The trail, if you could even call it that, was little more then a scar through the brush. Maybe once a logging path, no blazes, no signs, just a narrow thread leading straight into the trees. It didn't feel ominous, just old, forgotten. I started walking. The first hour was good, a little uphill, some scrambling over roots, but I liked that it wasn't manicured. It felt real, the kind of place you had to earn. There was barely any wind and no wildlife sounds at all. That struck me as odd, but also comforting. City noise has a way of drilling into your bones. The quiet was thick, like a blanket you could wrap around yourself. Then the trail started getting strange. It narrowed in ways that didn't make sense. Like the forest had been allowed to reclaim it unevenly. I expected to cross another trail eventually, or maybe hit a marker, a down sign. But the deeper I went, the less it felt like I was heading anywhere. The terrain shifted subtly, I thought. I heard a creek, soft trickling off to my right, when I cut through the underbrush to find it. There was nothing, no water, no mud, just more trees and ridges stacked like folds in a blanket. I tried doubling back, assuming I had gotten turned around, but the incline wasn't right. The rocks and roots were unfamiliar, even the light filtering through the leaves seemed off. I know how that sounds, but it felt like I had dropped into a slightly different version of the woods I had entered. So I pulled out my phone. No bars. GPS just spun, and spun like it was stalling for time. I stood there longer than I cared to admit, staring at that little blue dot that wouldn't lock in, waiting for something, anything to orient me, but nothing did. That's when it hit me. I was lost. Not panic lost, not yet, but the kind where your stomach dips and your thoughts start rearranging themselves into worst-case scenarios. I tried reasoning it out. Head downhill, follow a water source, find a road. That always works, right? Only downhill just turned into another ridge, then another. The deeper I went, the tighter everything felt, trees crowding in, paths twisting around, and the silence, which had felt calming at first, pressed harder against my ears like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then just as the last light started to fade, I saw it. A shape through the trees, straight edges, man-made. Relief hit me like a drug. Maybe a shed, a cabin, some old hunter's lean-to. People meant maps. Meant escape. It wasn't a cabin, not anymore. It looked abandoned for decades. 4 warped walls leaning in like they were holding each other up. Half a roof. A door not attached to anything. Just propped against the frame like a drunk, trying to stand still. I went in. The floor was dirt. Leaves and debris covered most of it in the back corner. I saw a rusted tin bucket and what looked like fabric. At first, I assumed it was blankets or forgotten tarp. But when I looked closer, it was clothing, layers of it. Jackets, shirts, pants, stiff with age. Mold had eaten through some of the fabric. Everything smelled faintly of damp rot. But the boots, that's what stuck with me. A pair of scuffed leather boots, still upright, perfectly positioned, like someone had stepped out of them neatly and never stepped back in. I stayed the night. What else was I going to do? I wrapped myself in the tarp and curled up in the farthest corner from the clothes. Sleep came in brief, restless pockets. Every creak or crack outside made me tense. I kept the flashlight on, but the battery started blinking red around 2 o'clock. In the morning, then I heard it, a slow, deliberate creak, wood bending, not snapping, coming from the wall directly behind me, not once, but twice. Like someone pressing their weight slowly, purposefully against the boards. Then a dragging sound like fingers or nails moving across the wood grain. I didn't turn around, I didn't move, I barely breathed. The sound stopped eventually. I stayed awake until dawn. As soon as the light shifted, I got up and left. No breakfast, just out. I picked the direction opposite from the creaking wall and started walking. Every 100 feet or so, I slashed a mark into the trees just to keep track, to be sure I wasn't doubling back. By midday, I hit a clearing and froze. It was the shack, the same lean, the same broken door, and the tree next to it. My knife mark still fresh. My legs almost gave out. I walked inside again. Don't ask me Why? And saw the boots were gone. Everything else was there. Same smell, same pile of clothes. But the boots weren't. I left fast. This time I didn't pace myself. I didn't mark trees. I just moved, didn't eat. Barely sipped water. My legs cramped, my throat burned. But I pushed. The woods didn't feel neutral anymore. The trees leaned in. The ground tilted wrong. And the quiet, it felt like something was listening near dusk. I stumbled into a patch of loose earth. I looked down and froze again. Footprints, same as mine. Not similar exact, same tread, same heel wear, same staggered gait, left foot dragging. Just slightly, like I had already been there. Or someone wearing my exact boots had. I kept walking. By nightfall, I told myself I would stop just long enough to rest. Not sleep, just sit. I found a tree, sat down with the pistol in my lap, and leaned back. My eyelids betrayed me. I drifted. When I woke, it was pitch black. No moon, no stars. And someone was standing between the trees. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. At first, I thought it might be another hiker, maybe a ranger or someone else who had gotten lost. But then my eyes adjusted and I saw myself, my jacket, my pack, my stance, same build, same tilt of the shoulders. Just standing there, hands at their sides, watching. I didn't wait, I ran, my legs burned. Branches tore at my arms and face. I tripped, slid, kept going. I didn't care where, I just ran. Finally, after what felt like hours, I hit gravel, a road. I dropped to my knees. Minutes later, headlights came over the ridge, a pickup. The driver slowed, rolled down the window, and gave me a look I'll never forget, like he wasn't sure if I was human or hallucination. But he opened the door. I told him I got lost hiking. He didn't ask more than once. He dropped me off in Grindle, 2 towns over. I got in my car, hands still shaking, and drove until the mountains were gone behind me. A guy named Drew, someone I'd seen maybe twice at cookouts, sent me a random message on Facebook. He said he had a cabin out in the Appalachians, and if I wanted to clear my head for a while, I could use it. He added, no neighbors for miles. Total quiet. At the time, that sounded like a cure. I just crawled out of a breakup that chewed me up and spit me out. The kind that leaves you checking your phone every 5 minutes, even though you know you shouldn't. I was tired. I didn't want city noise. I didn't want people. Silence sounded like medicine, so I said yes. Didn't even ask why he was offering or how often he went there. I just wanted to disappear for a few days. He gave me directions on a folded sheet of paper, handwritten like something copied from an old atlas. When I typed them into Google Maps, the first part worked fine, but the last stretch, the part that wound into the mountains, didn't register. Just a patch of green with no roads. I messaged him about it. He wrote back, normal GPS won't pick it up that far out. I believed him. The drive took 7 hours. Roads went from clean asphalt to cracked pavement to gravel to dirt. The kind of dirt that crunches like dry bones under your tires. By the last stretch, my phone was a paperweight. No bars, no data, dead. Quiet, except for the engine and the rattle of loose stones under the car. I told myself this was good. This was what I wanted. Disconnect, right? That's the whole point. The cabin was smaller than I expected. Just 1 floor. Weathered wood slats that looked like they'd seen better decades. The porch leaned like it was tired of standing. Windows were warped glass, the kind that makes shapes. Behind them looked just a little off. When I opened the door, a dry smell hit me. Wood sealed up too long with something faint underneath. Metallic almost, like tools left out in the rain. Inside it was simple. A bed, a small kitchen, a table scarred from years of plates and mugs. No TV, no Wi-Fi, just a radio on a shelf, and a fireplace big enough to curl up inside. For half a second, I thought about turning around. The silence was too thick, like a presence. But then I reminded myself, this is what you signed up for. The first day was easy. I unpacked, read a book I'd been putting off, made dinner on the old gas stove that hissed like it held a grudge. When the sun went down, I lit a single oil lamp and sat there listening. Here's the thing they don't tell you about silence. It's not peaceful, not really. Not when it's this deep. It feels like everything outside the walls is holding its breath, waiting for you to notice. Still, I slept fine that night. No dreams. I can remember the trouble started the next evening. I was at the kitchen table eating canned soup straight from the pot because I couldn't be bothered to wash a bowl when I heard it. Something hit the porch, just a tap, sharp like a small rock. Dropped on wood, I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. Waited, then it happened again, softer but deliberate. I told myself it was nothing, acorns maybe, or the wind shaking something loose. But then it came a third time, a slow, patient tap-tap. I set the spoon down and opened the door, stepped out. Onto the porch, nothing. The yard was empty. Beyond that, the tree line, thick, dark. About 50 feet away, just a wall of black shapes. I stared too long trying to make sense of it. The air felt heavy, pressing against my skin. I didn't linger, went back inside, locked the door, told myself it was animals, that I was overreacting, that the quiet was messing with me. Later, I wished it had been animals. That night around midnight I woke up, no reason, just awake. And then I heard it, the porch boards. They creaked slow and steady, the way they do when someone puts weight on them. Testing each step, one step, pause, another closer. My mouth went dry. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just lay there staring at the dark ceiling, feeling my pulse in my teeth. The steps reached the spot near the window by my bed, then stopped. Nothing. I counted seconds, then minutes. Could have been an hour. Could have been 5. At some point, the boards groaned again, moving away. Each step like a drop of ice watered down my spine. When the silence came back, it was worse than the sound. Morning didn't make me feel better, but I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. That maybe old wood shifts at night, until I stepped outside. In the dirt near the porch steps were footprints. Bare feet, not huge, not small, just wrong. The toes were too long, curling like they wanted to grip the earth. The tracks went one way toward the porch, none leading back. That's when I decided I was leaving. Didn't care I'd only been there 2 nights. Didn't care if Drew thought I was rude or ungrateful. I was done. I packed in under 10 minutes. When I opened the door to go, something was waiting on the porch, a rabbit dead, neck twisted all the way around, staring at its own back legs, its fur matted dark with something wet. I didn't think. Just grabbed my keys and walked fast toward the car. Halfway there, I looked up and froze. Something stood at the tree line. It was shaped like a person, but too tall, shoulders wrong, arms too long, hanging past its knees like loose ropes. Its head tilted at an angle that made my stomach not curious, but not human. I couldn't see its face. We stared at each other for 3 seconds. Then I ran, didn't care about noise. Didn't care if it followed. I dove into the car, slammed the door, locked it. My hand shook so hard, I dropped the keys twice before jamming them into the ignition. When the engine roared, I peeled out so fast the tires spit gravel like gunshots. I didn't look back, not until I hit the first bend in the road. And then in the rearview mirror, I saw it standing in the road, watching me, head still cocked, like a question it couldn't ask. I drove 3 hours without stopping, didn't breathe. Right until I saw the fluorescent glow of a gas station, buzzing like a swarm of bees. I parked under those lights and sat there, engine off, gripping the steering wheel like it was the last real thing in the world. The next day, when I could think straight, I pulled out the map Drew had given me. I wanted to know where I'd been, checked the coordinates twice. 3 times, there was nothing there. No road, just blank forest. A coworker named Lacey was the one who told me about it. We'd been stuck on a long lunch shift at the diner, and she started talking about weird little spots she'd come across since moving out to rural West Virginia. Not touristy stuff, no gift shops, no brochures, just places you wouldn't know about unless someone told you. This one was an old cemetery, She said it was tucked off some back road barely wide enough for a bicycle, let alone two cars passing each other. No sign, no gate. You'd drive right past it if you didn't know it was there. She said it didn't even have a name anymore, if it ever had one. The graves were so old. Most of them didn't have words left on them, just smooth slabs of stone, the way she described it. Forgotten was the word she used. It stuck with me. Forgotten things always feel heavier, not just abandoned, but left in a way that makes you wonder why. The next Saturday I had free, I decided to go see it. Not because I thought I'd see anything supernatural. I've never been that kind of person, but because I'm drawn to places like that. Places people used to care about but stopped. It's like you can still feel the gap they left behind, the drive out. There started normal enough, gas stations, a strip mall, a couple of farm supply stores. But the farther I went, the more the road felt like it was trying to spit me out. My phone signal dropped halfway there, which I expected, but the last 40 minutes were just winding pavement with no houses and no other cars. When I hit the last stretch, the road got so narrow that if another car had shown up, one of us would have had to reverse a good 100 yards to find a wider patch. Not that it mattered. There wasn't another soul in sight. I almost missed the turn, if you could even call it a turn. It was just a skinny opening in the trees with a strip of gravel disappearing into the woods. Looked more like a driveway to a hunt-in cabin than anything official. The gravel path ended in a little clearing surrounded by dense trees. The graves were scattered around like someone had dropped them there without a plan. No neat rows, no symmetry. Some stones leaned hard to one side, others had sunk halfway into the ground. A couple were lying almost flat. Some still had faint letters, names, dates. But most were blank from years of weathering. One marker was cracked clean in half, and both pieces were propped together like they were keeping each other from falling. A few graves had faded plastic flowers, the colors bleached into pale, brittle shapes. On one, there was an old mason jar with a couple inches of cloudy rainwater in the bottom. I didn't touch it. I walked toward the far corner where the grass thinned out. That's when I saw it, a long rectangular dip in the dirt. Same size and shape as a grave, but no marker at either end. The soil was slightly collapsed, like it had caved in a little. I was staring at it, wondering if it had ever had a headstone. When something flickered in the corner of my vision, it was quick. Just a flicker of movement to my right. I turned my head, expecting a bird, maybe, but saw nothing but crooked stones and weeds. I shrugged it off and kept walking. A few minutes later, it happened again. This time on the opposite side of the cemetery. Just a flash between two headstones. Gone before I could focus on it. I walked over, figuring I'd flush out a rabbit or squirrel. But when I got there, I noticed the leaves were pressed flat in a weird shape. Not paw prints, more like shallow rounded impressions. As if someone had been standing there. I told myself it was nothing. But then I started noticing other things. The first was subtle. I thought one of the old stones was in a slightly different spot than when I'd passed it earlier, only a few feet. But enough to make me stop and look. The second time, I knew it wasn't in my head. A tall, pale slab that had been right by the tree line before was now standing closer to the center, upright, not tipped, not fallen, moved. And there were no drag marks or disturbed dirt around it. That's when I started keeping track. I made another slow loop, mentally mapping where each stone was. I just finished when I heard it. A sound, faint at first. A slow, dry scrape like skin sliding over stone. Not tapping, not knocking, just deliberate contact. It came from behind me. I turned my head slowly, trying not to make it obvious I'd heard. The sound stopped. I walked toward where it had come from. The far corner with the sunken grave. Everything looked the same, except for one small square marker that I was certain had been several rows away before. Now it was sitting right at the edge of the depression. I had no idea how it had moved without me noticing. When I stepped back, my boot sank slightly into the ground. Not mud, just a soft give. Like something hollow was underneath. The scraping came again, sharper this time, closer. It was right behind my left shoulder. I didn't turn. I just started walking toward the car. Fast, but not running. I kept my eyes on the stones until I was nearly at the tree line. That's when the ground shifted under me again, like something big had moved beneath it. I ran, I didn't look back. My hands were shaking so badly, I dropped my keys twice before getting them into the ignition. Gravel sprayed behind me as I tore out of there. I didn't slow down until I hit the main road.